Your anxiety brought you here tonight, didn't it? That familiar weight on your chest, those thoughts that won't stop circling. I understand. You're safe now. Before we begin this journey together, if my voice feels like a friend you'd like to visit again, consider leaving a like or subscribing. But only if it feels right. No pressure in this peaceful space. And if you're listening from somewhere in this vast world, share your city and what time it is there. I love knowing that we're breathing together across time zones. Someone in Tokyo at sunrise, someone in London at midnight, all of us finding the same quiet moment. Now make yourself truly comfortable. Maybe dim those lights. Turn on a fan if you like that gentle hum. Grab an extra pillow. This is your time. In the next 3 hours, something beautiful is going to happen. Not because you'll try hard or do it right, but because you'll finally stop trying. The Buddha discovered something remarkable centuries ago. Peace isn't something you find. It's what remains when you stop searching. Tonight, I'll share 15 ancient Zen stories with you. Simple tales that work like medicine for modern exhaustion, for the 3 a.m. wake-ups, for tomorrow's worries that steal tonight's sleep, for that constant feeling that you're not enough. Already your breathing is changing. Your body remembers what your mind forgot. Peace lives in your cells, waiting. Let's begin this journey to stillness. Let me tell you about a pond that lives inside you. You might not know it's there, hidden beneath all that mental static, but it's been waiting, perfectly still, since you were very young. Maybe even before you learnt that stillness was something you could lose. Long ago, in a valley where mist rose like breath each morning, there was a small pond. Not grand or famous, not the kind of pond people traveled miles to see. Just a quiet circle of water, cradled by smooth stones that had been worn gentle by countless seasons. The trees leaned over it protectively, their branches creating a natural temple. Cedar and pine, their needles sometimes falling to float on the surface before sinking into the depths. This pond had a special quality. When the air was calm, its surface became so still, it could hold the entire sky. Not just reflect it, but hold it, as if the heavens had found a second home. Clouds drifted across it by day, stars appeared in its depths at night, the moon would visit, leaving silver footprints that lasted until dawn. The villagers knew about this pond. Some mornings, they would walk the forest path, just to sit beside it, not to speak, not to pray in the usual way, but to remember something they kept forgetting in the busyness of daily life. They would sit and watch their own faces appear in the water, and in that reflection, they would sometimes glimpse who they were before the world taught them to hurry. One evening, as the sky painted itself in purples and golds, a traveler arrived. His feet were dusty from many roads, his shoulders carried the weight of many miles, and even more thoughts. You know this weight. It's the same one you carry when you lie down at night, and your mind won't stop replaying conversations, when tomorrow's tasks line up like soldiers demanding attention, when yesterday's mistakes echo louder than today's mercies. The traveler had heard whispers about this pond, how it could show you something beyond your daily face, how it might offer what all his traveling hadn't found. Peace. That simple, impossibly elusive thing. Peace. He sat by the pond's edge, his legs folding beneath him with the creaking complaint of too many miles. He looked into the water. What he saw startled him. His own face, yes, but changed, distorted, worried lines etched deeper than he remembered, eyes that couldn't seem to rest even in reflection. Just then, a breeze stirred the surface. His reflection broke into 1,000 dancing pieces. "I look as scattered as I feel," he whispered to the approaching night. "This is you, isn't it? Looking at your life and seeing fragments, pieces that don't seem to fit, a face in the mirror that looks tired even after sleep, eyes that have forgotten how to soften." An old monk appeared, moving so quietly he might have been made of the mist itself. His robes were simple, the color of rain clouds. His feet barely disturbed the pine needles as he walked. He sat beside the traveler without invitation, without hurry. They watched the water together, the ripples slowly calming, the broken reflection beginning to gather itself. Finally, the monk asked softly, his voice like wind through leaves, "What do you see?" "I see chaos," the traveler replied. "I see my mind, never still, always churning. I see why I can't sleep, why I can't rest, why peace feels like a fairy tale told to children." The monk nodded with infinite gentleness, the kind of nod that says, "I understand," without words. The pond reflects clearly only when it's still, so it is with the mind. But notice something, friend. You cannot stop the wind from blowing. The practice isn't to control the wind. It's to watch the ripples with kindness and let them settle. Always, they settle if we let them. Right now, your mind might be creating its own wind. Maybe it's whispering about that email you forgot to send, or replaying that awkward moment from last week for the 100th time. Maybe it's fast-forwarding to tomorrow's presentation, or rewinding to that thing you wish you'd said differently. That's okay. That's just what minds do. They're like weather systems, always moving, always changing. The traveler closed his eyes. For a moment, his mind rebelled. "This is nonsense," it said. "Sitting by water won't pay your debts or solve your problems." But beneath that voice, something else stirred, a memory perhaps, of being young and unworried, of a time when sitting by water was enough. He listened to the evening sounds, crickets beginning their ancient songs, leaves whispering secrets to each other, a nightbird calling once, then settling into silence. His breathing began to slow, not because he forced it, but because breathing is like water. It finds its own level when we stop disturbing it. You're doing this right now. With each breath, the ripples in your inner pond are softening. You don't have to make this happen. It's happening by itself. The way flowers open when the sun touches them, the way rivers find the sea, the way you find sleep when you stop chasing it. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within, do not seek it without." When he spoke these words, he wasn't giving us another task for our endless to-do lists. He was revealing a secret, so simple, we keep missing it. The peace you've been searching for in tomorrow's achievements, in other people's approval, in perfect circumstances, in one more purchase, one more accomplishment, one more anything, it's already here. It's always been here, waiting beneath the ripples like treasure at the bottom of a clear lake. Think about the last time you watched a sunset, really watched it, not while scrolling your phone or planning dinner, but gave it your complete attention. For just a moment, your mind stopped commentating. You weren't thinking about your to-do list or checking notifications. You were simply there, merged with the colors, part of the sky's slow transformation. That's your still pond. It doesn't require a sunset. It only requires you to stop stirring the water. The traveler opened his eyes. The last light was fading, but he could still see the pond's surface. It had stilled completely now. His reflection had returned, but different. The worry lines were still there. The tired eyes remained, but something had changed. He wasn't fighting his reflection anymore. He was simply seeing it, the way you might look at an old friend with compassion. "How long does it take to find lasting stillness?" he asked the monk. The monk smiled, and in that smile was both humor and kindness. "How long does it take for the pond to still after the wind passes?" "Sometimes moments, sometimes longer, but the pond doesn't count. It simply returns to its nature. As will you. This is happening to you too. As my words flow over you like gentle water, something inside is settling. Those urgent thoughts are still there, but they're floating on the surface now, and you're sinking peacefully below them, into depths that have always been calm, even when the surface was stormy. In our modern world, we've forgotten how to be still. We wake to alarms that jolt us from sleep. We check phones before our feet touch the floor. We consume 30 notifications before breakfast. Our minds become like that choppy pond, never getting a chance to reflect clearly. We've created lives where stillness feels like laziness, where quiet feels like loneliness, where doing nothing feels like failure. But your body remembers stillness. It knew it in the womb, floating in warm darkness, perfect contentment without a single thought. It knew it as a child, when you could stare at dust motes dancing in afternoon light, completely absorbed, time forgotten. It knows it now, even if your thoughts are still chattering, even if part of you is saying, "This isn't working," or "I have too much to do." The monk stood to leave. His movement was like water itself, necessary but unhurried. Before walking away, he touched the traveler's shoulder, just a moment of contact, but in it was transmission of something wordless. "The pond doesn't mind the wind," he said. "It knows stillness will return. It has infinite patience with the weather. Trust this. Your mind, like the pond, knows how to be still. You don't have to teach it. You only have to let it. You can trust this too. Tomorrow, when anxiety visits, when your mind spins stories about what might go wrong, when the inner weather becomes stormy, remember the pond. Remember that beneath every ripple, stillness waits, not as a goal to achieve, but as your deepest nature, as what you are when you stop trying to be something else. Let your breath be like soft rain on the pond now, each exhale smoothing the surface a little more. There's nothing to fix, nothing to change, nothing to improve. The water knows how to be still. You know how to be still. You've always known. You just forgot for a while in all the rushing. As we leave this first story, feel how it stays with you. The pond isn't just in the story, it's in your chest, in your breath, in the quiet spaces between your thoughts. Can you feel it? That stillness that's always been there, waiting so patiently for you to remember. The traveler stayed by the pond until the stars came out. He didn't solve any of his problems that night. He didn't have any great revelations, but something loosened in his chest. Some fist that had been clenched for years began to open. And in that opening, peace entered. Not dramatic peace, not the kind worth writing home about, just a simple sense of, oh, I can stop fighting now. This is my wish for you tonight, that you feel that same loosening, that same permission to stop fighting the water, to let your inner pond remember its own nature. And now, like water flowing into water, we move gently to our next teaching about learning to bend without breaking, about discovering strength in softness. In the same forest where the pond rested, two very different teachers grew side by side. One was an ancient oak, thick-trunked and proud. Its bark was deeply grooved, like the face of an elder who had weathered many seasons. The other was a grove of bamboo, slender and always swaying, dancing with every breath of wind as if hearing music others couldn't. You've met these two before, haven't you? The oak is that part of you that believes strength means never bending, the part that says yes to every request at work because saying no feels like weakness, the part that holds everything together, even when you're exhausted, even when your body begs for rest, even when your heart whispers, enough. The oak had stood in that forest for 200 years. It had seen the village built. It had watched generations of children grow old. It wore its age like armor, proud of every ring in its trunk. When the wind blew, it stood firm. When rain fell, it barely swayed. It was, in every way, what we're taught to admire: solid, dependable, unshakable. The bamboo was different. It had arrived more recently, spreading from a single shoot into a living community. Where the oak stood alone, the bamboo grew together. Where the oak was rigid, the bamboo danced. Even the slightest breeze would set it swaying, back and forth, like prayer made visible. The oak would look at the bamboo dancing in every breeze and shake its mighty crown. "Why do you bend so easily?" it would ask, its voice like thunder. "Have you no backbone, no dignity? Look at me. I stand firm against all forces. I never yield. This is strength." The bamboo would sway and whisper back, its voice like silk. "Perhaps strength has more than one face. Perhaps what you call weakness, I call wisdom." This is the conversation happening inside you right now. part of you thinks you need to be harder, stronger, more resistant to life's pressures. You should handle everything without complaint. You should never show fatigue. You should be the oak, unbreakable, reliable, never asking for help. But another part, a wiser part, is beginning to question this story, beginning to wonder if there's another way to be strong. For years their debate continued, season after season, the oak growing thicker, more set in its ways, the bamboo growing taller, but never rigid. Villagers would rest in the oak's shade during hot summers. Children would play in the bamboo grove, delighted by its movement. Both were loved, both were needed, but they could never agree on the nature of strength. One night, the sky darkened with unusual speed, not the gentle darkening of sunset, but the angry purple of a storm that meant business. You know this kind of storm. It's the phone call that changes everything, the diagnosis that rewrites your future, the relationship that suddenly ends, the job that disappears without warning, life's winds that come not as breezes but as hurricanes. The storm hit the forest with tremendous force. Rain fell not in drops but in sheets. Wind howled through the valley like a living thing. Lightning split the darkness. Thunder shook the earth. It was the kind of storm that makes humans remember we're small, the kind that strips away illusions of control. The oak did what it always did. It stood firm. It clenched every fiber, tightened every ring of its ancient trunk. I have weathered worse, it thought. I will not bend. I will not break. I am oak. But the wind was stronger than pride, stronger than history, stronger than will. With a crack that echoed through the valley like a heartbreaking, the great oak split. 200 years of growth ended in a moment. It fell with the weight of all its certainty, crashed to the forest floor, and was still. The bamboo, oh, the bamboo, it danced wildly in the storm, bent until it nearly touched the ground, each stalk bowing so deeply it seemed impossible they wouldn't snap. The wind threw them east, then west. The rain beat them down. They looked like grass in a hurricane, fragile, overwhelmed, surely about to break. But they didn't fight the wind. They danced with it. They gave themselves to it. They bowed to its power without losing their roots. And when morning came, when the storm had spent its fury and moved on, the bamboo slowly, gracefully rose again. Wet, disheveled, but whole, still rooted, still alive, still able to dance. This isn't just a story about trees, it's about you lying here tonight carrying your own storms. Maybe you've been the oak lately, holding everything rigid, believing that if you just stay strong enough, work hard enough, control enough, nothing can hurt you. You've built your life on being unbreakable, but what does it cost you? Feel your body right now. Those places where you're holding tension, your shoulders perhaps, raised like shields, your jaw clenched against words you haven't said, your belly tight with tomorrow's worries. That's your inner oak, still trying to resist winds that have already passed, still bracing for storms that ended years ago. The Buddha taught that suffering comes not from pain itself, but from our resistance to it. The bamboo understood this in its very fiber. It didn't pretend the storm wasn't fierce. It didn't minimize the danger. It simply chose not to add its own force to the conflict. It chose to move with, rather than against. Think about the last time you faced something difficult. Maybe it was criticism from someone you respect. Your oak mind immediately went rigid, defending, explaining, proving why they were wrong, building walls, strengthening your position. But what if you had bent instead? What if you had said, "Tell me more," and really listened, not because they were right, but because bending doesn't break you, it frees you. Or perhaps it was a health scare. Your oak mind demanded you push through, ignore the symptoms, keep working, keep producing, keep being strong. But your body was asking you to bend, to rest, to yield to its wisdom, and in resisting, you created more storm than the illness itself. Right now, as you listen, you're learning the bamboo's secret. Each breath out is a small bow. Each release of tension is a gentle, yielding. You're not becoming weak, you're becoming wise. You're discovering that true strength isn't about never falling, it's about how you rise. In Japan, they have a phrase, Nana korobi ya oki. It means, fall down 7 times, get up 8. But the beauty isn't just in the getting up. It's in understanding that falling is not failure. It's the beginning of resilience. It's life teaching you to dance instead of stand. Your life has asked you to bend many times. When plans fell through despite your best efforts. When love changed shape without your permission. When your body said no to what your mind demanded. Each time, you had a choice. Resist or yield. Oak or bamboo. The bamboo teaches us that yielding is not giving up, it's giving over to what is, rather than what should be, giving over to the truth that we cannot control the wind. We can only choose how we dance with it. Feel your body right now. Where you were rigid when we began, something is softening. Your breath is finding more space. Your muscles are remembering they don't have to hold the world. Your heart is unclenching, just a little. This is you becoming bamboo, not all at once, but breath by breath. The village mourned the great oak. Children who had played in its shade wept, but in time, they discovered something beautiful. Where the oak had fallen, new life began. Wildflowers that had waited centuries for sunlight finally bloomed. Small animals made homes in its trunk. The oak's death became life for others. Even in ending, it served. And the bamboo, it continued to grow, spreading its wisdom through underground roots. New shoots appeared each spring, each one knowing in its DNA how to bend, how to survive by yielding. The grove became a sanctuary, a place where people came to learn flexibility, to practice letting go. Tomorrow, when pressure comes, and it will come, you'll have a new choice. You can be the oak, meeting force with force, or you can be the bamboo, strong in your flexibility, bending so you don't break, dancing with difficulty instead of declaring war on it. The bamboo grove still grows in that forest. If you visit on a windy day, you can hear it, the sound of strength that knows how to yield, the whisper of wisdom that bends but doesn't break. It sounds like your breath right now, soft and rhythmic, rising and falling, never forcing, always returning. You too are growing, right here, in this gentle darkness, not toward rigidity, but toward a grace that can hold anything. The oaks falling wasn't tragedy, it was transformation. Sometimes we need to fall completely, to learn how to rise differently, to discover that strength has many faces, and the softest is often the strongest. Let yourself sway a little now. Even lying still, you can feel it, that inner flexibility returning, the permission to be human, to be imperfect, to bend when life asks you to bend. The storm of today is passing, the winds of thought are gentling, and you, like the bamboo, are still here, whole, breathing, bending into peace. Our next story flows naturally from this one. From learning to bend, we learn to empty. From letting go of rigidity, we discover the gift of space, the open cup that can receive. A young scholar traveled far to meet a Zen master. His mind was like your browser, with 47 tabs open, each one seemingly urgent, each one demanding attention. He had degrees from prestigious universities, could quote philosophers from memory, had written papers that impressed his professors, but still, something was missing. Peace eluded him like water through clenched fists. Sound familiar? How many books have you read searching for the answer? How many podcasts have you consumed? How many techniques have you tried? Each one promising to be the key, each one adding another layer to your already full mind. The scholar had heard about this particular master. They said he was different, that he taught without teaching, that people left his presence changed, not by what he said, but by what he didn't say. The scholar was skeptical but desperate, a dangerous combination that often leads to truth. The journey to the master's hut was arduous, up mountain paths that challenged his city, soft feet, through forests where the only sounds were his own breathing and birds he couldn't name. With each step, his mental arguments grew louder. "This is foolish," one voice said. "You already know enough." But another voice, quieter, urged him on. When he finally arrived, the master's dwelling surprised him. It wasn't grand, no golden statues, no elaborate decorations, just a simple wooden structure that seemed to grow from the mountain itself. Smoke rose gently from a chimney. A garden showed signs of recent tending. It was utterly ordinary, which somehow made it extraordinary. The master greeted him at the door, an old man with eyes that seemed amused by everything, including the scholar's obvious exhaustion and hidden arrogance. "Welcome," he said simply. "You must be tired. Come, sit." The scholar bowed formally and launched immediately into his introduction. "Master, I've studied the Diamond Sutra extensively. I understand the Four Noble Truths. I practice meditation daily, sometimes for hours. I've read every major Buddhist text. I've attended retreats with renowned teachers, but enlightenment hasn't come. Peace still escapes me. What am I missing? What more must I learn? The master listened without interrupting. His face showed neither approval nor judgment, just presence. When the scholar finally paused for breath, the master smiled and said simply, "Let's have tea." You've been this scholar, searching for peace in information, looking for rest in more doing, thinking, if you just learn enough, understand enough, achieve enough, accumulate enough, finally, you'll feel enough. But the hole inside seems to grow with each thing you pour into it. The master moved with unhurried grace, heating water over a small flame, selecting tea leaves with the care others might give to jewels. The scholar watched, impatient, his mind already forming arguments about time wasting, about getting to the real teaching. He didn't understand that the teaching had already begun. When the tea was ready, the master began pouring into the scholar's cup. The amber liquid rose steadily, steam carrying the scent of earth and time. It reached the halfway point, then 3/4, then the brim, but the master didn't stop. Tea overflowed onto the saucer, then onto the low wooden table, then onto the scholar's expensive robes, then onto the floor. Still the master poured, his face serene. "Master," the scholar cried, jumping back, "stop! The cup is full. No more will go in. You're wasting the tea." The master set down the pot gently. He looked at the scholar with those amused eyes. "Exactly. You are like this cup, so full of what you think you know, so full of your own opinions and conclusions. How can I show you Zen when you have no space to receive it? How can wisdom enter a mind already overflowing?" The scholar sat in stunned silence. For perhaps the first time in years, he had nothing to say. Right now, your cup is overflowing too, not just with knowledge, but with tomorrow's worries sitting heavy as stones, yesterday's regrets replaying on endless loop, stories about who you are and who you're not, beliefs about what you need to be happy, certainties that might be prisons. The Buddha called this beginner's mind, Shoshin, not the mind that knows nothing, but the mind willing to hold things lightly, to see with fresh eyes, to meet each moment as if for the first time. Children have this naturally. They look at a flower like they've invented color. They hear rain like it's the world's first symphony. When did you lose this? When did your cup become so full that wonder couldn't find space? Feel what's in your cup right now. Maybe it's that running commentary about your worth. I should be further along by now. I'm too old to change. I've tried everything and nothing works. These thoughts are old tea, gone cold and bitter. They've been sitting in your cup so long you've forgotten they're not part of the cup itself. The scholar sat with the master for 3 days. At first, his mind raged, "This is waste of time. I could be reading. I could be practicing. I could be achieving." But slowly, something began to shift. They swept the floors together in silence. The scholar's mind initially composed essays about the meaning of sweeping, but eventually there was just the broom, just the floor, just the simple rhythm of care. They prepared meals. The scholar wanted to discuss the Buddhist philosophy of eating, but the master only smiled and chopped vegetables. Eventually, the scholar found himself absorbed in the colors, the textures, the sound of knife on wood. His theories faded, replaced by the simple miracle of carrots being orange. You're emptying now too. With each breath out, something releases, not forever, just for now, just enough to make room. Can you feel it? The spaciousness that's beginning to emerge. In our culture, empty feels like failure. Empty hands mean poverty. Empty calendar means unpopular. Empty achievements mean worthless. But in Zen, empty is sacred. The empty cup can receive. The empty room can welcome guests. The empty mind can finally rest. Think about your phone for a moment. How many apps are running in the background right now, draining battery, slowing everything down, sending notifications that pull you from the present? Your mind works the same way. Old programs running constantly, comparing, judging, defending, planning, regretting, worrying. What if you could close them? Not forever, not even for tomorrow, just for tonight. What if you could power down the part of you that needs to know everything, that needs to be right, that needs to have answers? On the third evening, the master poured tea again, this time into a fresh cup, this time stopping at just the right moment. Now we can begin, he said. The scholar tasted that tea like he'd never had tea before, because in a way, he hadn't, not with an empty cup, not with a quiet mind, not with space to actually receive. The tea was the same, but the drinker was different. You're tasting something new right now too. This moment, this breath, this gentle darkness. They're not what your full cup expected. They're simpler, quieter, and somehow exactly enough. The master never gave the scholar the answers he came for, never explained the secret teaching, never revealed the hidden technique. Instead, he showed him something better, that the peace he sought wasn't in more, it was in less, that wisdom wasn't something to accumulate, it was space to be discovered. Your cup is making space now. Those heavy thoughts you carried into tonight, they're not gone, but they're floating lighter. There's room between them, room for breath, room for quiet, room for something new to enter. The Buddha said, in the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. That last part, that's your practice tonight. Letting go of thoughts not meant for this moment, letting go of problems that belong to tomorrow, letting go of the need to be anything other than here, now, breathing, empty enough to be filled with peace. The scholar left the mountain changed. His friends noticed immediately. What did the master teach you? They asked eagerly. He smiled and poured them tea, stopping at just the right moment. He taught me when to stop pouring, he said. You're learning this too, when to stop adding, when to stop accumulating, when to stop filling your mind with more noise. The cup of your consciousness is beautiful, but only when there's room for light to play on its surface, only when there's space for peace to enter. And now, with a lighter cup, we flow into the next teaching about questions that have no answers, and why that might be the greatest relief of all. Sometimes the mind needs to break a little to remember what lies beyond thinking. A young monk named Tenzin was burning with the desire to understand, not the ordinary understanding of how things work, but the deep understanding of what things are. He meditated until his legs went numb. He studied until his eyes burned. He practiced until practice became another form of striving. Still, enlightenment remained a distant shore. His teacher, watching this fierce effort, decided it was time for a teaching that couldn't be grasped, only surrendered to. One morning, as Tenzin sat eager for instruction, the master gave him a riddle, not a normal riddle with a clever answer waiting to be discovered, but a koan, a question meant to break the mind's addiction to solving. Tenzin, the master said, his voice gentle as mist, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Tenzin blinked. Surely he had misheard. Master, do you mean what is the sound when I clap my hands together? No, the teacher smiled. One hand. What sound does one hand make when it claps? You know this feeling. Life gives you impossible questions too, not koans from masters, but equally unanswerable riddles. Why did this happen to me? What's my purpose? Will I ever be truly happy? When will I feel like enough? Questions that keep you awake at 3 a.m., turning them over and over, like stones that refuse to become smooth. Tenzin tried everything. First, the logical approaches. He clapped one hand against his chest that made a sound. No, said the master. He waved one hand through the air very fast. It made a whooshing noise. No, said the master. He snapped his fingers. That's still two things meeting, the master observed. Days passed. Tenzin's frustration grew like a tight knot in his chest. He tried philosophical answers. The sound is silence. The sound is everything. The sound is nothing. Each time, the master simply shook his head. Stop trying to be clever, the master finally said. The answer isn't in your thinking. This is what your mind does at 3 a.m. It takes unsolvable problems and attacks them like math equations. If I just think harder, if I just analyze more, if I just find the right angle. But what if some questions aren't meant to be solved? What if they're meant to dissolve the solver? Tenzin sat with this impossible question for weeks. At first, his mind fought like a trapped bird, beating against the cage of the unanswerable. He'd wake in the night with new theories, rush to his teacher with fresh interpretations, each one met with the same gentle, no. You're feeling this too, the exhaustion of trying to think your way to peace, the fatigue of attempting to solve your life like it's a problem, your mind spinning its wheels, creating more dust than movement. Then something began to shift, not all at once, but like ice beginning to crack in spring. Tenzin stopped looking for the answer, started feeling into the question. What if the point wasn't to find the sound? What if the point was to discover what happens when you stop searching? He began to notice things, the sound of his own breathing, the rustle of his robes when he walked, the way silence itself seemed alive, full of presence, full of something that didn't need words. One morning, as dawn painted the monastery walls gold, Tenzin sat in the garden. A leaf fell from a tree, spiraling down in perfect silence. He watched it, completely absorbed, not thinking, just watching. And suddenly, he understood. Not with his mind, but with something deeper. The sound of one hand isn't a sound at all, it's the silence that holds all sounds. It's the space between your thoughts right now. It's what's listening to these words. It's what's always been here. Before you learnt to think, before you learned to worry, before you learned that you needed to become something other than what you are. The Buddha once pointed at the moon and told his students, "My teaching is like a finger pointing at the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you'll miss the heavenly glory." Your mind is always looking at fingers, analyzing the pointing, measuring the angle, debating the technique. But tonight, just for tonight, you're starting to see what they point toward, the vast quiet that holds everything, the peace that doesn't need explanation. Think about music for a moment. Without the silence between notes, it would just be noise. Your thoughts are the same. They need space to be beautiful. They need pause to have meaning. The sound of one hand is that space. It's what makes the music possible. Tenzin ran to his teacher, but when he arrived, he found he had nothing to say. How do you explain silence to someone? How do you describe space? He simply raised one hand and smiled. The teacher's eyes crinkled with joy. Now you hear it. What are you hearing right now? Beyond my voice, beyond your thoughts, beyond the sound of your breathing, there's something else, isn't there? A presence that doesn't need words, a knowing that doesn't need proof, a peace that doesn't need earning. In your daily life, you're constantly clapping with two hands, action and reaction, problem and solution, desire and fulfillment, cause and effect. Everything meeting something else, everything making noise. But peace lives in one hand, in being without doing, in knowing without thinking, in the sound that isn't a sound. The koan breaks the mind's addiction to figuring everything out. Right now, you don't need to figure out tomorrow. You don't need to solve your life. You don't need to understand why things happened as they did. You can just be here, listening to the sound of one hand, which is everywhere, which is nowhere, which is exactly where you are. It's in your breath, that soft rhythm that continues, whether you think about it or not. Who decides to breathe? Who makes the heart beat? What is this intelligence that lives your life while you sleep? That's the sound of one hand. Years later, Tenzin became a teacher. Students would come with their urgent questions, their desperate need to understand, their exhausting pursuit of enlightenment. He would look at them with infinite compassion, remembering his own struggle, and he would ask, "But can you hear the silence between your words? Can you feel the space between your thoughts?" That's where the teaching lives. You're learning this tonight, that peace isn't found in answers. It's found in the space before questions form, in the pause between breaths, in the moment between sleep and waking, in the gap between one thought ending and another beginning. Your mind might still be whispering its questions. Let it, but notice, you don't have to chase them anymore. You can let them float by like clouds while you rest in the sky that holds them. The sky doesn't need to understand clouds. It just gives them space to pass. The sound of one hand is playing right now. It's been playing all along, since before you were born, since before you learned your name, in the spaces between these words, in the quiet of your deepening breath, in the stillness that grows as thoughts fade. This is why you came here tonight, not for more answers to add to your collection, but to remember the peace beyond questions, to find the rest beyond solving, to hear the sound that isn't a sound but is more real than any noise. Let this be your lullaby, the sound of one hand clapping, the perfect silence that holds you, the peace that needs no explanation, the presence that requires no understanding. Tomorrow, you'll return to the world of two hands, of doing and achieving, of problems and solutions. But something will be different. You'll carry this silence with you, this space, this knowing that not everything needs to be solved. Some things just need to be lived. And from this silence, we drift naturally into our final story of this section, about letting go of the need to know what comes next, about finding peace in the uncertainty itself. Because sometimes the greatest wisdom is learning to say, "I don't know," and feeling the freedom in those words. There was a farmer who understood something most of us spend lifetimes missing. He lived with the seasons, hands familiar with soil. His eyes could read weather patterns in cloud formations, but his deepest wisdom wasn't about crops or rain. It was about the stories we tell ourselves, and how those stories become our prisons. His farm sat at the edge of a village where mountains touch sky, not wealthy, not poor, just enough. He had one horse that helped plow the fields, strong and loyal. It had been with him for years. The farmer's days followed simple rhythms: rise, work, eat, rest. No drama, no philosophy, just life lived close to the ground. One morning, the farmer woke to find his fence broken. The horse was gone. Hoofprints led toward the mountains where wild horses roamed. By noon, the entire village knew. News travels fast when life is quiet. The neighbors gathered, shaking their heads. "Such terrible luck," they said. "How will you plow your fields? How will you bring your crops to market? This is a disaster." The farmer looked toward the mountains where his horse had disappeared. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said simply, "Maybe so, maybe not." The neighbors exchanged glances. What kind of response was that? His livelihood had just walked away, but the farmer was already mending the fence, not frantically, just steadily, as if losing and mending were equally part of farming. You've been trained to label everything instantly, good or bad, success or failure, blessing or curse. Your mind is like a sorting machine, putting experiences in boxes before they've finished happening. That promotion, good; that illness, bad; that relationship ending, disaster; that opportunity missed, failure. But are you sure? Are you really sure? 3 days later, hoofbeats woke the village. The farmer's horse had returned, but not alone. 3 wild horses followed, young and strong. They entered the mended corral as if they'd always belonged there. Now the neighbors celebrated. "What incredible fortune!" they exclaimed. "You've tripled your wealth. You're the luckiest man in the village. The gods smile upon you." The farmer fed all 4 horses, his movements calm, unchanged by this reversal. "Maybe so, maybe not," he said. "Think about your own life, that job you desperately wanted, but didn't get. Where did it lead? That relationship that ended, breaking your heart, what grew in that broken space? That plan that fell apart spectacularly, what unexpected door opened because of it? Can you really say, with absolute certainty, that what you called bad was only bad?" The next week, the farmer's son decided to train one of the wild horses. He was young, eager to prove himself. The horse was magnificent, but untamed. You can see where this is going, but life rarely gives us such foresight. The horse bucked violently. The son was thrown high into the air. He landed hard. The sound of breaking bone echoed across the field. His leg was badly fractured, the kind of break that takes months to heal, the kind that leaves you different. Again, the neighbors came. "How terrible," they moaned. "Your only son, right before harvest. He may never walk properly again. Those wild horses were a curse." The farmer tended his son's leg with gentle hands. He prepared herbal poultices, adjusted splints, brought soup and stories. When asked about this misfortune, he looked at his son, alive, healing, present. "Maybe so, maybe not. Right now, something in your life feels broken. Maybe it's trust after betrayal. Maybe it's a dream that crashed into reality. Maybe it's your sense of direction, your confidence, your health. Your mind wants to write the ending, to declare it tragedy, to close the book. But what if the story isn't finished? What if you're only on chapter 3 of something much longer? Soon after, war came to the region. Soldiers arrived in the village with orders. Every able-bodied young man must come, no exceptions. The village wept as sons were taken. Brothers, husbands, futures marched away to battles they didn't choose. The soldiers looked at the farmer's son, saw his splintered leg, shook their heads, and moved on. The neighbors, tears still wet on their faces, looked at the farmer with new eyes, some with envy, some with wonder, some with a dawning understanding. The broken leg saved him, they whispered. What we called misfortune became protection. The farmer said nothing this time. He didn't need to. His eyes held the same steady acknowledgement. Maybe so, maybe not. The story continues. The Buddha taught that suffering comes from attachment, not just to things, but to our stories about things, to our certainty about what everything means, to our desperate need to know whether we're winning or losing, as if life were a game with a scoreboard instead of a river that knows its way to the sea. You're lying here with your own meanings. That conversation last week, you're sure it meant rejection, that opportunity missed. You're certain it was your only chance. That diagnosis, you know it means your life is over. But do you? Do you really? Or is that just chapter 5, and you're trying to write chapter 50? The farmer's wisdom wasn't indifference. He felt joy when the horses returned. His heart clenched when his son fell. He worried about harvest with no help, but he didn't let his feelings harden into facts. He stayed soft, curious, open to the stories unfolding. This is what's happening to you tonight. Your grip on certainty is loosening. Those fixed stories about your life, the ones you've told yourself so many times they feel like truth, they're becoming questions, not anxious questions, but gentle ones. What if that loss was protection you couldn't see yet? What if that delay was perfect timing? What if that closed door saved you from a room you didn't need to enter? What if you can't see the whole picture because you're still inside the frame? Years passed in the farmer's village. Seasons changed. Stories evolved. Some soldiers returned. Many didn't. The son's leg healed stronger than before. He married the blacksmith's daughter. They had children who rode horses like they were born to it. The wild horses, once considered a curse, became the foundation of a thriving business. Through it all, the farmer tended his fields. His hair grew white, his hands more weathered, but his eyes kept the same quiet understanding. When young people came seeking wisdom, he'd smile. "I don't have wisdom," he'd say. "I just have patience with not knowing." Feel how this story is working on you. Those tight knots of, "This is definitely bad." Those certainties of, "That was absolutely wrong." They're loosening, not because the events changed, but because your relationship to them is softening. Tomorrow, when your mind starts its labeling machine, when it rushes to judge each moment, to file everything as good or bad, success or failure, you might hear the farmer's voice, gentle as rain. Maybe so, maybe not. This isn't about positive thinking. It's not about pretending bad things are good. It's about humility, the humble recognition that we see only a tiny slice, that life is writing a story bigger than our understanding, that what looks like an ending might be a beginning in disguise. Your anxiety often comes from thinking you know how things should go, from believing you can see the whole story from page 10. But what if you can't? What if that's not failure? What if that's freedom? What if not knowing is the doorway to peace? The farmer lived to be very old. On his last day, his children and grandchildren gathered. One asked, "Grandfather, do you fear death?" He smiled one more time, that same smile that had met every fortune and misfortune. "Maybe so, maybe not. Let's see what comes next." And in that acceptance, that complete surrender to the mystery, there was no fear, only curiosity, only openness, only peace. You're practicing this now, letting go of conclusions, resting in the space between meaning and mystery, finding peace not in knowing, but in allowing. The stories you've carried about yourself, about what defines you, about what limits you, about what blesses or curses you, maybe so, maybe not. Can you feel it? The relief of not having to be sure, the freedom of letting life surprise you, the peace of trusting a story you can't yet read. As we complete this first chapter of our journey, feel how different your mind is. Less noise, more space, less certainty, more peace, less need to know, more ability to flow. The pond showed you stillness beneath motion. The bamboo taught you strength in bending. The cup revealed the gift of emptiness. One hand introduced you to silence beyond sound. And the farmer gave you permission to not know, to not be sure, to let life unfold like a flower, in its own time, in its own way. These aren't just stories, they're living medicine, working in you now, dissolving what needs to dissolve, opening what's ready to open. Take a breath with me. Feel how much quieter it is inside. The noise hasn't disappeared, but you're not lost in it anymore. You've found the stillness underneath, the flexibility within, the space between thoughts, the silence beyond questions, the peace of not knowing. And now, with a quieter mind and softer heart, we prepare to go deeper, ready to meet what remains when the noise fades, ready to touch what's been waiting beneath all that churning, ready for the second part of our journey. Now that the noise has quieted, something else becomes visible, the tender places, the parts of you that hurt in ways you've been too busy to acknowledge. It's safe to look at them now, here in this gentle darkness, with only my voice and your breath as companions. The Buddha was sitting with his students one afternoon when a monk approached. This monk carried something heavy. You could see it in how he walked, in the tight line of his shoulders, in eyes that couldn't quite meet anyone else's. "Master," he said, his voice rough with held-back tears, "I've been practicing for years. I meditate, I follow the precepts, I study the teachings, but still, pain finds me. My heart breaks, my body ages, loss visits me. If the practice works, why do I still suffer?" The Buddha's eyes filled with such compassion, not the distant compassion of someone who's never hurt, but the deep understanding of someone who has. He was quiet for a moment, letting the monk's pain have space, not rushing to fix or explain. Then he spoke. "Let me tell you about 2 arrows. When someone is struck by an arrow, it hurts. This is natural. This is being human. The arrow pierces the skin. Pain follows. Blood flows. This is the first arrow, and everyone who lives will feel it. You know this arrow. It's the phone call with test results you didn't want. It's the empty chair at the dinner table. It's the job loss that came without warning. It's the relationship that ended despite your best efforts. It's your body not working the way it used to. Life shoots these arrows not because you've done something wrong, but because this is the nature of living in a world where everything changes. The Buddha continued. But then, something else happens. The person who's been shot begins to think, "Why me? What did I do to deserve this? This is unfair. This shouldn't be happening. I must have done something wrong. I'm being punished. My life is ruined. This will never get better." "These thoughts," the Buddha said gently, "these are the second arrow, and this one we shoot into ourselves." Feel that for a moment. The difference between the pain that comes and the pain we add, between what happens and the story we tell about what happens, between the wound and our resistance to being wounded. The monk's eyes widened. You could see understanding beginning to dawn, like the first light touching mountain peaks. "So the practice," he said slowly, "isn't about avoiding the first arrow. No, the Buddha smiled sadly. As long as you have a body, it will age. As long as you love, you will grieve. As long as you're human, the first arrow will find you. The practice is about the second arrow, learning not to shoot it, or when you do, learning to put the bow down. Think about your own pain, not the deep thinking, just the gentle noticing. Is there something that hurt you and then hurt worse because of what you told yourself it meant? Maybe someone left, that's the first arrow, but then your mind added, because I'm not lovable, because I'm too much, because I'm not enough. Those are second arrows, each one shot from your own bow into your own heart. Or your health changed, first arrow, but then came, I should have prevented this. My body is betraying me. I'm weak. I'm broken. Second arrows, creating suffering on top of pain. The beautiful thing, the thing that can change everything, is that the second arrow is optional. Not easy to avoid. We're so practiced at shooting it, but optional. A woman in the group raised her hand. But Master, how do we stop when the pain comes? The thoughts follow so quickly, like a reflex. The Buddha nodded. Yes, like a reflex, because you've been practicing it your whole life. When you were small and fell down, adults rushed over saying, "Oh no, how terrible, poor thing." They taught you to add story to pain, but you can learn differently. How? She asked. The same way you learn to shoot the second arrow. Practice, but this time, practice pausing. When pain comes, breathe. Notice the stories starting and choose, just for this moment, not to believe them. Say to yourself, first arrow, I acknowledge you. Second arrow, I see you, but I don't need to shoot you. Right now, in your body, there might be first arrows, old ones that never quite healed, new ones still tender. Can you feel them without adding story? Can you let them be what they are, just sensation, just experience, without making them mean anything about who you are? Years ago, I knew a woman who lost her child. The first arrow was devastating, unbearable, but she told me later, the worst part wasn't the grief. Grief is love with nowhere to go. Grief is honorable. The worst part was thinking I should be over it, thinking I was grieving wrong, thinking I was weak for still crying. Those thoughts hurt worse than the loss. She learned to let the first arrow be, to say, yes, this hurts. Yes, I'm sad. Yes, this is hard. And that's okay. That's human. That's love. The second arrow fell from her hands. This teaching isn't about becoming emotionless. It's not about transcending human feeling. The Buddha wept when his friend died. He felt the first arrow, but he didn't add, I shouldn't feel this. I'm supposed to be enlightened. This proves I've failed. He just wept, cleanly, purely, and then he was done. In your life tomorrow, or next week, or in an hour, a first arrow will come, maybe small, a sharp word from someone, a disappointment, a body pain. Notice how quickly your mind wants to shoot the second. They always, I never. This means What if you paused? What if you took one breath? What if you said, first arrow acknowledged, second arrow, I see you, but not today? The monk who asked the question, he practiced this teaching for years. Later he said, I still feel pain, but it's clean pain now. It comes, I feel it, it passes. I don't create stories, I don't build monuments, I just let it move through, like weather. You're learning this now, in this quiet space. Your second arrows are loosening, those old stories about what your pain means. They're just thoughts, and thoughts, unlike first arrows, can be put down. Feel your breathing. Notice how it knows what to do without your management, without your story. Your healing can be like this too, natural, unforced, not complicated by judgment. The first arrow is part of life, but the second arrow, that's a choice. And tonight, right now, you're choosing differently. You're putting the bow down. You're letting yourself heal without adding suffering to pain. This is compassion, not a feeling but an action, the action of not shooting the second arrow into yourself or anyone else. Rest here for a moment in this new understanding. You don't need to be arrow-proof, you just need to stop shooting yourself. And in that choice, that simple, difficult choice, peace begins. We flow now into something gentler, a teaching about presence, about how the simplest things, when met with full attention, become doorways to peace. After learning about the arrows we shoot into ourselves, let's rest in something simpler, something so ordinary you might have done it today, making tea. There was a Zen teacher named Rikyu who understood something profound, that enlightenment isn't found only in meditation halls, or on mountain peaks, or after years of practice. Sometimes it's found in the steam rising from a cup, in the weight of ceramic in your palms, in the pause before the first sip. A successful merchant came to visit Rikyu. This man had everything: money, respect, a thriving business, but success had become another kind of prison. His mind never stopped calculating. Every conversation was a transaction. Every moment was measured in profit and loss. "I've heard you teach the way of tea," the merchant said. "I want to learn. I've mastered business. Now I want to master peace." Did you hear how he said that? Master peace, as if peace were another acquisition, another line on his resume. This is how we often approach spiritual practice, like it's another goal to achieve, another mountain to climb, missing entirely that peace isn't found at the summit, it's found in putting down the climbing gear. Rikyu smiled and led him to the tea house. It was autumn. Leaves the color of fire drifted past the windows. The room was simple, almost bare, just tatami mats, a small alcove with a single flower, and the implements for tea. The merchant looked around, confused. Where are the teachings, the scrolls, the wisdom texts? "First," Rikyu said softly, "we make tea." You might be like this merchant, looking for peace in complexity, in the next technique, the next book, the next understanding. But what if peace is already here, waiting in the simplest acts, hidden in plain sight. Rikyu began the ceremony. He moved like water, each gesture flowing into the next. He heated the water, not while thinking about something else, but as if heating water were the only thing in the universe. The merchant watched, impatient at first, his mind calculating how long this would take, what he could be doing instead, how much money he was losing by sitting here. But something in Rikyu's movements began to work on him. The way the master's hands cradled the tea bowl, the care with which he measured the tea, the complete attention given to each detail. Without speaking, Rikyu was teaching. This moment matters. This action is enough. This breath is complete. When you make your morning coffee or pour a glass of water, where is your mind? Already at work, rehearsing conversations, making lists. The body pours while the mind races ahead, and we wonder why we feel scattered, why peace feels so far away. Rikyu whisked the tea into a gentle froth. The sound was soft, like wind through pine needles. The merchant found himself listening, really listening, for the first time in years, not listening for information or advantage, just listening to hear. When the tea was ready, Rikyu turned the bowl carefully, presenting its best side to his guest. This small gesture, this consideration, it broke something in the merchant. When was the last time he'd done anything just to bring beauty to another, without calculating the return? He accepted the bowl, and for reasons he couldn't explain, his eyes filled with tears. "What's the teaching?" he whispered. "You're drinking it," Rikyu replied. "This is the secret. There is no secret. The peace you seek in tomorrow is available in this sip. The calm you chase in achievement waits in this breath. The enoughness you think comes with more is already here, in less." Think about water for a moment. How many times today did you interact with it, washing your hands, taking a shower, drinking when thirsty? Each time, peace was available, not the dramatic peace of enlightenment stories, but the simple peace of presence, of being where you are, doing what you're doing. The merchant stayed with Rikyu for 3 hours. They spoke very little, made tea several times, watched the light change as afternoon became evening. With each bowl, the merchant's mind slowed a little more. The calculations quieted, the measurements ceased. "I don't understand," he said finally. "We've just been drinking tea, but I feel different." Rikyu nodded. "When you drink tea, just drink tea. When you do business, just do business. The suffering comes when you drink tea while doing business in your mind. This is your life, isn't it? Eating while watching TV, walking while texting, listening while planning your response, always split, never whole, and then wondering why you feel fragmented, why peace eludes you. But right now, in this moment, you're just listening, not doing anything else, and notice how much calmer you feel than when you started. This is the teaching, this is the practice, this is the way home. Tomorrow, when you make your first cup of something, remember Rikyu, remember the merchant. Let it be a ceremony, not a grand ceremony, just a return to simplicity. Feel the weight of the cup. Notice the temperature. Watch the steam rise and disappear, taste without commentary, swallow without hurrying to the next sip. In that moment, you're not practicing peace. You are peace. You're not seeking presence. You are presence. You're not trying to be spiritual. You're simply being, which is the most spiritual thing of all. The merchant became a student, not of tea, but of attention. He still ran his business, but differently. He learned to be where he was, to do what he was doing, without his mind racing to the next thing. The strangest thing, he told Rikyu years later, is that I make better decisions now when I'm not constantly strategizing. When I'm just present, the right action becomes obvious. This is the paradox. By letting go of optimization, everything optimizes. By releasing the chase, what you need finds you. By being here, you arrive everywhere you need to be. Your breathing has changed. Have you noticed? It's deeper now, slower, more like waves on a calm shore. This didn't happen because you tried. It happened because you stopped trying and allowed what's natural. Let this be your tea ceremony tonight. This listening, this breathing, this simple presence. Nothing to achieve, nowhere to get, just this cup of moment, perfectly brewed, perfectly received. And from this simplicity, we move to something even subtler, a teaching about what we think we see and what's really there. Your mind is becoming very quiet now, quiet enough to see something important. How often what troubles us isn't what's there, but what we think is there. There was a young monk named Koji, sincere in his practice but caught in a web of his own making. He saw criticism where there was only concern, heard rejection where there was only silence, felt judgment where there was only observation. You know this web, you've woven it yourself, thread by thread, story by story, until you can't see clearly anymore, until everything is filtered through old pain and expected hurt. One evening, Koji went to the monastery's pond to fetch water. The moon was full, hanging low and golden, like a lantern lit by gods. When he looked into the water, there it was, perfect, whole, floating on the surface. For a moment, he forgot it was a reflection. His hand reached toward it, hoping to touch such beauty, but his fingers met only water. The image scattered into ripples. The moon broke into 1,000 pieces. He jerked his hand back, afraid he'd broken something precious, but as the water stilled, the moon returned, unchanged, unbroken, still whole in the sky, still perfect in its reflection. This is what your mind does. It shows you reflections and tells you they're real. It projects your fears onto others' faces, your doubts onto their words, your past onto your present. The teacher found Koji still staring at the water. "What do you see?" he asked. "The moon," Koji replied, "but when I touch it, it breaks." The teacher knelt beside him. "Does it? Look up." There in the sky, the moon continued its journey, untouched by the pond's ripples, unaware of being broken in a monk's perception. The moon in the water, the teacher said gently, is like your thoughts about others. You see their actions, but through the water of your mind, what you see as anger might be their fatigue. What you read as rejection might be their distraction. You're not seeing them, you're seeing your reflection of what you fear they think. How many moons have you broken that were never broken? How many relationships have you complicated by responding to reflections instead of reality? Think of someone close to you. Now think of a recent interaction that left you unsettled. They said something, or didn't say something, and your mind created a story. But was it their story or yours? Koji spent the next days observing, not others, but his own projections. When a brother monk walked past without greeting, his mind immediately said, "He's angry with me." But then he paused, looked up at the real moon, and wondered, or maybe he's worried about his sick mother. Maybe he didn't see me. Maybe this isn't about me at all. The shift was subtle, but everything changed. He began to see how much suffering he created by believing his projections were facts. You're doing this too. Right now, some part of you might be thinking, "This isn't working. I'm not relaxing enough. I'm failing at meditation." But that's just more moon in water, another projection. The real moon, your true nature, remains whole. A week later, Koji had a revelation. He was carrying tea to the abbot, nervous as always, reading judgment in every glance. When he entered the room, the abbot was gazing out the window, his face unreadable. "I've disappointed him," Koji's mind whispered. "He's thinking I'm too slow, too clumsy, not worthy." But then Koji remembered the pond. He looked again, not at his projection, but at the actual man, and saw an elderly teacher watching birds, perhaps thinking of nothing related to Koji at all. "Your tea, master," Koji said, his voice steady for the first time. The abbot turned, smiled. "Thank you. I was just remembering how my teacher loved to watch sparrows." All that worry, all that story, and the abbot had been thinking of birds. This is the human condition. We walk through life responding to ghosts, fighting reflections, breaking moons that aren't there, while the real moon, serene and whole, continues its journey above. In your relationships, how often do you react to what you think someone means rather than what they say? How often do you have entire conversations in your head, then respond to those instead of the person in front of you? The water of your mind is conditioned by every past hurt, every childhood wound, every time someone left, every criticism that cut deep. These experiences are like mud, stirred up from the bottom, clouding your perception, making every moon look broken. But understanding this is the beginning of freedom. When you know you're looking at water, not sky, when you remember you're seeing reflections, not truth, you can pause, breathe, let the water clear. Koji became known for his unusual gift. He could be with others without projection, without assumption. People felt safe with him because he saw them, not his ideas about them. "How do you do it?" a young monk asked. "Simple," Koji smiled. When I find myself sure about what someone thinks or feels, I remember the pond. I ask myself, am I seeing the moon or its reflection? Then I look up at the real sky, and usually I find I was wrong. You can practice this starting now. That story you're telling yourself about why someone did something, that certainty about what they think of you, set it down, just for a moment. Look at the actual sky, not your pond. The freedom is immediate. When you stop breaking moons that were never broken, when you stop fighting reflections that were never real, when you remember that the truth is usually simpler and kinder than your projections. Rest here in this clearer seeing. The water of your mind is settling now. The reflections are calming, and perhaps, just perhaps, you're beginning to see what was always there, unbroken, whole, true. Now we move to a teaching about finding silence, not by escaping noise, but by discovering what lives beneath it. The world never stops ringing, does it? Notifications, conversations, the endless hum of modern life. Even now, even in this quiet moment, you might hear something, a car passing, a clock ticking, the whisper of your own thoughts. There was a temple famous for its bell, cast centuries ago. Its sound could reach 3 villages. When struck at dawn, it woke fishermen and farmers, called monks to meditation, marked the beginning of each day with a tone so pure, people said it could heal hearts. But one winter, a great storm damaged the bell tower. The mechanism broke. The bell could no longer ring. The villagers felt the loss immediately. How will we know when to wake? How will we synchronize our day? The silence feels wrong. You understand this. When the noise you're used to stops, it can feel more disturbing than the noise itself, like when the power goes out and suddenly you hear how loud the quiet is. The monks tried to repair the bell, but the damage was beyond their skill. Days passed, then weeks. The bell hung silent, a presence without a voice. Then something unexpected happened. People began coming to the temple anyway. At first just a few, then more. They would sit beneath the silent bell, close their eyes, and listen. "What are you listening for?" a traveler asked. "The bell doesn't ring." An old woman smiled. "That's what I'm listening to, the not ringing. It has its own sound." This seems like paradox, but you know this sound. It's what you hear between heartbeats. It's the pause between breaths. It's what holds music together, not the notes, but the silence that gives them meaning. More people came. They discovered something remarkable. Sitting beneath the silent bell, they could hear things they'd never noticed. Their own breathing, the wind's conversations with leaves, the sound of being alive. One young mother brought her restless child. "He never stops moving," she said. "Never stops talking. I don't know what to do." They sat together beneath the bell. At first the child fidgeted, complained, asked why they were wasting time, but his mother simply sat, patient as the bell itself. Slowly, the child grew curious about the quiet. He began to listen, not for something, but to the absence. And in that absence, he found something he'd been missing: rest. This is your invitation, not to find a quieter place, but to find the quiet place within, the one that exists even in noise, even in chaos, even when life won't stop ringing. The abbot watched this phenomenon, people transforming not through sound, but through its absence. He made a decision: we won't repair the bell. The monks were shocked. But Master, it's our duty. The bell has rung for centuries. And now, the abbot said, it serves by not ringing. Sometimes the greatest teaching is in what we don't do, what we don't say, what we don't add. In your life, you're constantly adding more activities, more commitments, more noise, thinking peace will come when you finally get everything done. But what if peace comes when you stop? Stop adding, stop ringing, stop trying to fill every silence. A businessman visited the temple, stressed beyond measure. I need the bell to ring, he said. I need something to cut through all this noise in my head. A monk led him to the bell. Sit, he said simply. But it doesn't ring, the man protested. Exactly, the monk smiled. For an hour the man sat, frustrated, checking his watch, calculating lost productivity, but somewhere in the second hour, something shifted. The urgent calls of his mind began to sound less urgent, the critical voices less critical. By the third hour, he was crying, not from sadness, but from relief. I can hear it, he whispered. The silence. It's been there all along, under everything. I just couldn't hear it over my own noise. This is what you're discovering right now. The silence beneath these words, the quiet beneath your thoughts, the peace beneath your seeking. It doesn't need a bell to announce it. It doesn't need conditions to exist. It simply is, always, waiting like a parent for you to come home. Years passed. The silent bell became more famous than it had ever been when it rang. People traveled from distant lands, not to hear something spectacular, but to remember what they'd forgotten in all the ringing. A young monk once asked, Master, when does the silent bell ring? The old abbot touched his chest. Here, it rings here, in the space between heartbeats, in the pause between thoughts. Can you hear it? The young monk listened, not with his ears, but with something deeper, and yes, there it was, the silent bell, ringing continuously in the quiet spaces of his own being. You have this bell too. It's ringing now, in your breath, in your heartbeat, in the spaces between my words, not calling you to do something, but calling you to rest, to remember that beneath all the noise, you are the silence. Tomorrow, when the world starts ringing again, when demands crowd in, when thoughts spiral, remember the temple bell. Remember that silence isn't something you find, it's something you are. And sometimes, the most powerful response to all that ringing is to become, like that bell, present, steady, profoundly, peacefully silent. From this silence, we move to our final story of this section, about letting go of the need to blame and finding freedom in an empty boat. You're very peaceful now, peaceful enough to look at something that usually disturbs that peace, the story of who hurt you and why. A monk named Shen loved the early morning. Before dawn, when the lake was mirror still, he would take a small boat, row to the center, and meditate as the sun rose. It was his sanctuary, his daily return to quiet. One morning, wrapped in mist and silence, he closed his eyes, settled into stillness. The water lapped gently, his breathing slowed, peace descended like snow. Then, a jolt. Another boat had crashed into his, hard enough to rock him, hard enough to break his meditation. Anger flared instantly, hot and righteous. Who would be so careless, he thought? Who disturbs this sacred time? Don't they see I'm meditating? Don't they care? He opened his eyes, ready to confront, ready to teach about respect, about mindfulness, about consideration. But the boat was empty. No one was there, just an old vessel that had broken free from shore, drifting on the current, following the water's will, unaware it had disturbed a monk's morning practice. Shen sat stunned. His anger had nowhere to go, no target, no one to blame, no one to correct. And in that moment, he saw something profound. His anger wasn't caused by the collision. It was caused by his assumption that someone meant harm. Think about this. How much of your pain comes not from what happened, but from believing someone wanted it to happen? The empty boat floated away, but the teaching remained. Shen began to see empty boats everywhere. The merchant who spoke rudely, empty boat, driven by his own fears, his own pressures, not seeing Shen at all, just colliding in passing. The friend who forgot his birthday, empty boat, adrift in her own struggles, not meaning to neglect, just human, just forgetful, just overwhelmed. Even his father, whose criticism had shaped him, empty boat, carrying generations of expectation, repeating what was done to him, not seeing his son, just seeing his own unfulfilled dreams. This teaching changes everything. When you see boats as empty, anger transforms to compassion, hurt transforms to understanding. The story of me versus them becomes just currents meeting in the vast lake of shared human confusion. You've been hit by empty boats, haven't you? That parent who couldn't love you the way you needed, empty boat. They gave what they had, which wasn't enough, but it wasn't personal. That partner who left, empty boat, following their own current toward what they needed, not trying to hurt you, just trying to find their way. That boss who overlooked you, empty boat, lost in their own performance fears, their own pressures from above, not seeing your worth because they couldn't see past their own survival. This isn't about excusing harm or pretending pain doesn't matter. Shen's boat was still jolted. The collision was real, but suffering, the kind that lasts, the kind that poisons, comes from the story that someone steered their boat deliberately into yours. Most of the time, they were just drifting, eyes closed, lost in their own meditation, on their own pain. Shen became a different teacher, after the empty boat, when students came with grievances, with stories of betrayal, he would listen deeply, then ask gently, "Are you sure their boat wasn't empty?" One student protested, "But they knew what they were doing. They chose to hurt me." Shen nodded. "Perhaps, but even boats with people in them can be empty. When someone hurts you, they're usually not seeing you. They're seeing their own pain projected onto your face, responding to their own ghosts, fighting their own battles. You just happen to float by. Feel this in your own heart, that person you've been angry with for months, maybe years. What if their boat was empty? What if they were just another wounded human, drifting without navigation, colliding without intention? The freedom isn't in their apology. It's in your understanding that they couldn't steer better than they did, that if they could have loved you better, they would have. But their boat was empty of that capacity in that moment. Years later, an old woman came to Shen, bitter about her life, listing everyone who had failed her, each collision, each wound, each empty boat she thought was full. Shen listened until she was done, then asked, "And your boat, when it hit others, was it empty too?" The woman went very still, because suddenly she could see all the times she had drifted, unconscious, into someone else's mourning. This is the complete teaching. We are all, sometimes, empty boats, driven by currents we don't understand, colliding without meaning to, causing pain without intention. When you know this, really know it, forgiveness becomes not a virtue to develop, but a natural response, like stepping aside when an empty boat drifts by. You don't have to take it personally. You don't have to carry it. You can just notice, empty boat, and return to your morning meditation, to your peace, to your own journey. The lake of life is full of boats, all of us trying to navigate with broken rudders and clouded vision, bumping into each other in the mist. But when you understand the boats are empty, when you see we're all just trying to find our way home, the collisions don't hurt as much. The lake becomes less lonely, the journey less personal, more shared. Rest now in this emptiness, not the emptiness of lack, but the emptiness of space, room to move without collision, room to float without blame, room to be an empty boat yourself when you need to be. We've completed the second movement of our journey. You've met what remained when the noise dissolved, the arrows you've been shooting, the tea you've been missing, the moons you've been breaking, the silence you've been seeking, the boats you've been blaming. And now, even quieter, even more peaceful, we prepare for the final teaching, the journey home to who you've always been. Part 3. Returning Home. Story 11. The Master's Silence. You've traveled far tonight, through stillness and storms, through arrows and empty boats. Now we slow even more, like a river approaching the sea. The current becomes gentler, wider, deeper. We're coming home to something that was always here, waiting for your return. There was a master named Jinyu who lived in a small temple at the edge of a mountain village. He was known throughout the region, but not for his eloquent speeches or brilliant insights. Jinyu was known for his silence. People would travel for days, sometimes weeks, just to sit in his presence. They didn't come to hear wisdom. They came to be held in his quiet presence, to rest in the deep pool of his peace. The temple was simple, just a few wooden buildings nestled among pine trees. Birds sang in the mornings, wind moved through branches in the afternoons, and at night you could hear the distant sound of a stream. But the most profound sound in that temple was Jinyu's silence. It wasn't an empty silence or a cold silence. It was full, warm, alive with presence. One autumn day, when the leaves were turning gold and red, a man arrived at the temple gates. You could see he was carrying invisible weight. His shoulders bent forward as if pulling a heavy cart. His hands moved restlessly, picking at his sleeves, adjusting his bag, never still. His eyes darted around, unable to settle on anything for more than a moment. The monks who greeted him recognized the signs. This was a man drowning in his own thoughts, suffocating under the weight of his stories. They'd seen it many times before. They led him gently to the master's room. The room was almost bare. Just cushions on the floor, a low table with a teapot, and a single flower in a vase. Jinyu sat in the corner, his eyes soft, his presence like a calm lake. The man entered and immediately began to speak. "Master, I've come because I'm suffering. My wife left me last year, and I can't stop thinking about what I did wrong. My business is failing, and I lie awake every night worried about money. My health is declining, and I'm afraid of what's coming. I've tried everything: meditation, therapy, exercise, prayer. Nothing helps. The thoughts won't stop. Please, Master, tell me what to do." But before he could continue, Jinyu raised one hand. Not abruptly, but gently, like a leaf falling from a tree. The gesture was so soft, so without force, that the man stopped mid-sentence. He stood there, confused, his mouth still half open, words dying on his lips. The master's eyes were kind, but clear. He gestured to a cushion across from him. Just that. No words, no explanations. Just an invitation to sit. The man sat down, still ready to continue his story. He had prepared it during his journey, rehearsed all the details, all the reasons why his life was unbearable. But something in Jinyu's presence made the words feel suddenly unnecessary, like bringing a flashlight into bright sunlight. They sat facing each other. The master's breathing was deep and slow, like wind through a mountain pass. Without even noticing at first, the man's breathing began to match the master's rhythm. This is what happens when we're in the presence of deep peace. Our bodies remember their natural state. Minutes passed. The man waited for instructions, for teachings, for something to do. His mind was saying, "This is strange. Why isn't he speaking? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I doing this right?" But Jinyu just sat, breathing, present, like a mountain that has been there for 1,000 years. An hour passed. The man's urgency to tell his story began to fade. The words that had seemed so important, so necessary to speak, began to feel heavy and unnecessary. Why disturb this quiet with all that noise? Why bring yesterday's pain into this peaceful moment? In the second hour, something shifted. The pushing stopped. The man found himself just sitting, just breathing, just being there. When was the last time he had done this? When was the last time he had sat without agenda, without trying to solve something, without the constant pressure to become better, different, fixed? You know this pressure. It follows you from morning to night. The voice that says you should be more productive, more successful, more spiritual, more something. Always more. Never just this. Never just enough. By the third hour, tears came. Not the dramatic tears of catharsis or breakthrough. Just quiet tears, the kind that fall when defenses finally dissolve. The man didn't know why he was crying. He wasn't thinking about his wife or his business or his health. He was just sitting there, and tears were falling like rain. Jinyu didn't move to comfort him. He didn't lean forward with tissues or soothing words. He just stayed present, steady, like a lighthouse in fog. His presence said without words, "This is okay. You're okay. Let it flow." This is the deepest compassion, not trying to fix someone's pain, not rushing to make it better. Just being there, creating space where someone can finally stop performing wellness, stop pretending to be okay, stop holding it all together. In that space, healing happens by itself. After 3 hours, the man's tears stopped. He looked up at Jinyu, and for the first time really saw him. An old man with wrinkled skin and kind eyes. Nothing special, nothing mystical. Just a human being who had learned how to be still. The man bowed deeply and left. He hadn't spoken a single word after his initial outburst. Jinyu hadn't taught him anything in the conventional sense. But something fundamental had changed. Later, when friends asked what happened, the man struggled to explain. "I went there with so many questions, so many problems that needed solving. But in his silence, they all fell away. I realized I didn't need answers. I needed presence. I needed someone to see me without requiring my story, without needing me to explain or justify or make sense of my pain." In that seeing, in that silent acknowledgement, something loosened. I remembered who I was before all the problems. I remembered peace. In our modern world, everyone wants to talk. We have therapy and coaching and processing and sharing circles. And these can be valuable. But sometimes, the deepest healing comes from being held in silence. From being seen without being analyzed. From being accepted without being understood. Think of a time when someone sat with you in your difficulty without trying to fix it. Without offering advice or platitudes or 5-step solutions. Just there, breathing nearby, sharing space with your pain. How rare that was. How healing. Jinyu taught this way for 40 years. Thousands came to his temple, each carrying their own burden. Business people with their stress, parents with their worry, young people with their confusion, old people with their regrets. They came expecting words of wisdom, techniques for peace, answers to their questions. Instead, they found silence. And in that silence, they found what they were really looking for. Not solutions to their problems, but space from their problems. Not different circumstances, but a different relationship to their circumstances. Not a new self, but their original self, waiting patiently beneath all the noise. One young student stayed at the temple for several months. He was eager to learn, always asking questions. One day, he couldn't contain himself anymore. "Master," he said, "why don't you teach with words? Why don't you give us instructions, techniques, wisdom?" Jinyu looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke, one of the few times anyone heard his voice. It was soft, like water over stones. "Words add," he said. "Silence reveals." The student didn't understand at first. But over time, sitting in that quiet presence day after day, the meaning became clear. Words add more thoughts to an already overcrowded mind. Silence reveals what's already there, the peace, the stillness, the wholeness that thoughts obscure. You're touching this silence now. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper. My words are like boats, carrying you to a shore where words aren't needed, where you can rest in the quiet that has always held you. There's nothing you need to understand from this story. Nothing you need to remember or apply. Just let yourself be held by this moment, by this breath, by the silence between my words. Let yourself be seen without needing to explain who you are. Let yourself be accepted without needing to earn it. The man who visited Jinyu that autumn day went on to live an ordinary life. His business still had ups and downs. His health still had challenges. He still thought about his ex-wife sometimes. But something fundamental had shifted. He had touched the silence beneath the noise. And once you touch it, you never fully forget it. When stress would build, he would remember sitting with Jinyu. He would close his eyes, slow his breathing, and return to that silent room. Not the physical room, but the room inside himself that Jinyu had helped him find. The room where he didn't need to be fixed because he wasn't broken. Where he didn't need to explain because existence needs no justification. Where he could just be. This is your invitation too. Here, in the darkness, in the quiet of night, you can put down whatever you've been carrying. Not forever. You can pick it up again tomorrow if you choose. But for now, for these precious moments, you can rest. You can let the silence hold you. You can remember who you were before you learned to worry. Jinyu died on a spring morning, sitting in meditation. They found him with a slight smile on his face, as if he had just remembered something amusing. He left no writings, no recorded teachings, no systematic philosophy. Just thousands of people who had been touched by his silence, who had learned that peace isn't something you achieve. It's something you allow. Let the silence work on you now. Let it wash over you like warm water. Let it fill the spaces between your thoughts. Let it remind you of what you've always known but sometimes forget, that beneath all the noise of living, there is a vast, peaceful quiet. And you are that quiet. You always have been. From this deep silence, we move into a story about the thread that connects all hearts, all losses, all love. Story 12. The Mustard Seed. Some stories touch places in us that we try to keep protected. This is one of those stories. It's about grief, about love, about the invisible thread that connects every human heart. If you've ever lost someone dear to you, this story is especially for you. During the Buddha's time, in a small village nestled between rice fields and gentle hills, there lived a young woman named Kisa Gotami. Her name meant frail one, but there was nothing frail about her love. She had married young, to a kind man who worked with his hands. Their life was simple but full. And then their son was born. If you're a parent, you know how a child changes everything. Suddenly the world becomes both more beautiful and more terrifying. Every sharp corner is a threat, every cough a worry. But also, every smile is a miracle. Every small hand reaching for yours is pure magic. Kisa Gotami felt all of this. Her son was the light that made everything else make sense. He was a happy child, quick to laugh, always curious. He would follow his mother around the house, chattering in the way small children do, mixing real words with invented ones. She would carry him to the market, and the vendors would smile and give him treats. Life was good. Life was full. Life was exactly as it should be. Then one ordinary morning, everything changed. The boy woke with a fever. Not unusual, children get fevers. Kisa Gotami did what mothers do. She held him, cooled his forehead with damp cloths, sang the songs that usually soothed him. But this time was different. The fever climbed higher. His little body began to shake. And then, as the sun reached its peak, he went still. The world ended. Not metaphorically. For Kisa Gotami, the actual world ceased to exist. The sun might have continued shining, but not in her universe. Birds might have kept singing, but she couldn't hear them. Everything real and solid became dreamlike and strange. Only one thing remained real, the weight of her child in her arms. Her mind simply refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. "No," she said, first quietly, then louder. "No, he's just sleeping deeply. He's sick and needs medicine. I need to find medicine." She wrapped him in his favorite blanket and stood up. Her husband tried to stop her, tears streaming down his face, but she pushed past him. "I need to find medicine," she repeated. Have you ever been in a moment where reality becomes unbearable? Where your mind, in its mercy, simply refuses to process what's happening? This is where Kisa Gotami was. In that space between knowing and accepting, where denial becomes a life raft in an ocean of pain. She went from house to house in her village, knocking on every door. "Please," she would say, "my son is sick. Do you have medicine? He just needs the right medicine." The villagers would look at the still bundle in her arms, and their faces would crumble with pity. Some turned away, unable to bear it. Others tried to speak gently to her, to help her understand. but she couldn't hear them. She could only hear her own voice saying, "He needs medicine." By afternoon, the whole village knew. Women wept for her. Men stood in doorways, not knowing how to help. Children were hushed and told to play quietly. The baker's wife, who had lost her own child years before, finally approached Kisa Gotami. She didn't try to explain or convince. She simply said, "There is a holy man, the Buddha, staying in the grove outside the village. Perhaps he can help." Hope flickered in Kisa Gotami's eyes. Yes, a holy man. Holy men had powers. They could heal. She half ran to the grove, her child growing heavier with each step, though he weighed no more than before. She found the Buddha sitting under a tree, surrounded by disciples. Without ceremony, without greeting, she pushed through the circle and laid her child at his feet. "Please, Lord," she said, her voice raw from pleading. "My son is sick. You have powers. I've heard the stories. Please give me medicine for my son." The Buddha looked at her, then at the small, still form at his feet. His eyes filled with such compassion that some of his disciples had to look away. It wasn't pity. Pity distances us from another's pain. This was compassion, the full recognition of shared human suffering. He had been a father once. He knew. "Yes," he said softly, and Kisa Gotami's whole body sagged with relief. "I can help you. But first, I need you to bring me something. I need a handful of mustard seeds." "Yes, yes," she said eagerly. "I'll get them right away." Mustard seeds were common, used in cooking. Every household would have them. "But," the Buddha continued gently, "they must come from a house where no one has died. The seeds must come from a home that has never known death." She didn't pause to think about the strangeness of this request. She only heard that there was something she could do, a task that could save her son. She bowed quickly, gathered her child, and hurried back to the village. At the first house, she knocked with renewed energy. "I need mustard seeds," she said. "For medicine. The Buddha sent me." The family gladly brought out their jar of seeds. But when she added, "They must come from a house where no one has died," their faces changed. The grandmother spoke softly. "Child, my husband died in this house 3 winters ago. Our seeds cannot help you." At the next house, it was a child who had died. At the next, a mother in childbirth. House after house, family after family, the same story. Everyone had seeds. Everyone wanted to help. But every home had been touched by death. As the day wore on, something began to shift in Kisa Gotami. At first, she just moved faster, knocked harder, spoke more urgently. But as the stories accumulated, this one's father, that one's baby, the other's brother, a different awareness began to dawn. She wasn't just collecting refusals. She was collecting a map of grief that covered the entire village. By evening, she had knocked on every door. She stood at the edge of the village, looking back at all those houses, each one holding its own story of loss. Her son lay heavy in her arms, For the first time since morning, she really looked at him. His face was peaceful. He wasn't suffering. He was gone. She sat down under a tree, still holding him, and began to weep. But these were different tears than the wild grief of the morning. These tears were mixed with something else, a strange, painful comfort. She wasn't alone. Every mother in the village had wept these tears. Every father had felt this breaking. Every family had an empty place at their table. She saw it now, the invisible thread that connected every house, every heart. Grief was the price of love, and everyone who had loved had paid it. Her pain was unique in its specifics. This child, this face, this particular laugh that would never sound again. But the pain itself was ancient, shared, part of the human story. When Kisa Gautami returned to the Buddha, she came without mustard seeds, but with understanding. She carried her son one last time, but differently now. Not as a mother desperate to deny death, but as a mother ready to honor it. She laid him gently at the Buddha's feet. "I could not find a house untouched by death," she said quietly. The Buddha nodded. "And what have you learned?" "That I am not alone," she said. "That grief is the tax we pay for love. That my son's death is part of the way things are, not a punishment meant for me alone. That every person I meet has carried this weight." She performed the funeral rites for her son with the help of the village women. They knew what to do because they had done it before. They sang the songs that needed singing, spoke the words that needed speaking. And Kisa Gautami found that she knew the words too, though no one had taught them to her. Grief has its own language, and we all learn it eventually. After the ceremonies, she returned to the Buddha and asked to become his disciple. Not to escape her grief, it would travel with her always, like a shadow, but to learn how to carry it with grace, to help others who would inevitably join this fellowship of loss. The Buddha never told her that her pain would end. He never minimized her loss or suggested it was somehow for the best. He simply showed her that she wasn't alone in it, that every human heart has been broken, that we're all walking each other home through a world where everything we love will eventually be lost. Years later, Kisa Gautami became known as a particularly compassionate teacher. When people came to her with fresh grief, she would listen with perfect attention. Sometimes she would send them to find mustard seeds from a house untouched by death. Not cruelly, but so they could discover what she had discovered, that loss is the common human inheritance. That we're all in this together. In your life, you've lost things. Maybe not a child, but other precious things. A parent, a friend, a marriage, a dream. And in those moments of loss, you might have felt singled out by fate. "Why me?" the heart cries. "What did I do to deserve this?" But loss doesn't come because we deserve it. It comes because we're human. Because everything in this world is temporary, including us. The Buddha's teaching isn't that we shouldn't grieve. It's that we shouldn't grieve alone. That we're all part of a vast web of hearts that have loved and loved again. Think of everyone you know. behind each face is a story of loss. The cheerful colleague who lost her mother last year, the quiet neighbor whose son struggles with addiction, the friend who miscarried and never speaks of it. We're all walking around with our griefs, trying to appear normal, thinking we're alone. But we're not alone. Kisa Gautami's story reminds us that grief is the thread that weaves us into the human family. When we lose someone, we join an ancient lineage. We become part of a story that stretches back to the first human who loved another and had to say goodbye. There's a strange comfort in this universality. Not that it makes the pain less, nothing makes the pain less, but it makes the pain shared. You're not crazy for still crying years later. You're not weak for being changed by loss. You're human. Beautifully, terribly, perfectly human. The mustard seed became a symbol in Buddhist teaching. Such a tiny thing, almost weightless. But it carries within it the potential for growth, for life, for continuation. Our griefs are like that too. Small seeds that, when planted in the soil of acceptance, can grow into compassion. Not right away, not easily, but eventually. Rest now in this truth. Whatever you've lost, whoever you're missing, you're not alone. Across the world tonight, others are lying awake with their own grief. Others are learning to live with absence. Others are discovering that love doesn't end with death, it just changes form. The thread that connected Kisa Gautami to every household in her village connects you to every person who has ever lived. We're all in this temporary world together, loving what we'll lose, holding what will slip away. And somehow, in that shared vulnerability, there is a deep peace. The peace of not having to pretend we're exempt from loss. The peace of joining the human family in its fullness. Kisa Gautami lived many more years after her son's death. She laughed again, though differently. She loved again, though with the knowledge of impermanence. She became a guide for others walking the path of grief. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, she would hold mustard seeds in her palm and remember not just her son, but her connection to all beings who have loved and lost. This is the mustard seed teaching. Not that loss doesn't matter, it matters infinitely, but that it matters to everyone. That in our deepest pain, we're held by the accumulated compassion of all who have walked this path before us. That we're never as alone as we think. Now we turn from the universal experience of loss to another universal experience, the endless seeking for satisfaction outside ourselves. Story 13. The Stone Cutter. You're floating now in that deep quiet that comes after touching profound truth. Ready to hear about a journey we all take, the circle of seeking that leads us far from home before bringing us back to where we started. This is the story of someone just like you and me, convinced that happiness lives somewhere else. There was a stone cutter who worked at the base of a great mountain. Every morning, he would walk the familiar path from his simple home to the quarry. His tools were basic but well maintained: a hammer, chisels of various sizes, a measuring cord. His hands were rough from years of work, his back strong from lifting. His life was repetitive, predictable, real. Each day looked much like the last. Wake before dawn, simple breakfast of rice and tea, walk to the mountain as the sky lightened. Find the right stone, read its grain, begin the patient work of shaping. The sound of metal on stone would ring through the valley. Tap, 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 a rhythm as regular as heartbeat. By evening, tired but satisfied, he would walk home, eat his simple dinner, and sleep the deep sleep of physical exhaustion. He wasn't unhappy exactly, but he wasn't happy either. He existed in that grey space where so many of us live, not suffering acutely, but not thriving. Getting by, making do, occasionally wondering, is this all there is? One day, he was called to deliver stones to a merchant's house in the wealthy part of town. He loaded his cart carefully, made sure the stones were secure, and made his way through streets that grew wider and cleaner as he climbed the hill. The houses grew larger, the gardens more elaborate. By the time he reached the merchant's gate, he felt like he had traveled to a different world. The servants who met him wore silk. They moved with the quiet efficiency of those who work in beauty. They led him through the gate, and what he saw took his breath away. The courtyard was like a painting come to life. Flowers arranged with perfect artistry, fountains singing with clear water, paths of white sand raked in peaceful patterns. And the house itself, room after room of polished wood and precious objects. As he unloaded his stones, he caught glimpses of the life inside. The merchant reclining on silk cushions, being served tea in cups so delicate they seemed to be made of light. No calluses on those hands. No ache in that back. No worry about tomorrow's rice. A thought arose in the stonecutter's mind, sharp and clear. If only I were him. If only I had his wealth, his comfort, his ease. Then I would be happy. Then life would be good. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The universe, which sometimes has a strange sense of humor, granted his wish. Suddenly he was the merchant. Silk robes replaced his rough clothes. Soft hands replaced his calloused ones. He found himself reclining on those very cushions he had envied. At first, it was everything he had imagined. The food was exquisite, the bed soft, the worries about money gone. He spent his days in leisure, his evenings in entertainment. Servants anticipated his every need. Life was sweet. But one day, a prince passed through the town. The stonecutter, now merchant, was required to go out and bow as the royal procession passed. He stood with the other wealthy citizens, but they all had to lower their heads. The prince sat high in his golden carriage, looking neither left nor right. Power radiated from him like heat from a flame. As the merchant bowed, a familiar feeling arose. He doesn't bow to anyone. He commands, and others obey. If I were the prince, then I would have real power. Then I would be truly satisfied. And again, the universe shifted. He became the prince. Now he was the one in the golden carriage. Soldiers cleared his path. Ministers hung on his every word. His decisions affected thousands. Surely this was the pinnacle. Surely now he had arrived. But summer came, and with it, blazing heat. Even in his palace, even with servants fanning him, the prince sweated. The sun beat down mercilessly, caring nothing for royal blood. It touched peasant and prince alike, and both withered under its power. Looking up at the sun, the prince thought, "It rules over all. It needs no soldiers, no ministers. Its power is absolute. If I were the sun, nothing could touch me. I would be supreme." So he became the sun, blazing, radiant, essential. He looked down on the world, warming the earth, making crops grow. His light reached everywhere. Kings and beggars alike needed him. This, surely, was ultimate power. Until a cloud drifted between him and the earth. Just a simple cloud, but it blocked his light completely. All his blazing power stopped by mere vapor. The realization stung. This cloud defeats me without effort. It must be mightier. I must become the cloud. As a cloud, he felt the freedom of movement. He could go where wind took him, could bring rain or withhold it. He could block the mighty sun. But then he encountered the mountain. No matter how he raged, no matter how much rain he poured, the mountain stood unmoved. The mountain simply endured. Of course, he thought, the mountain is eternal. It doesn't need to move or change. It simply is. This is true power, not doing, but being. I must become the mountain. As the mountain, he felt a peace he hadn't known before. Storms came and went. Seasons cycled. He remained. Birds nested in his trees. Streams ran down his slopes. He was home to countless lives, foundation for the whole valley. This felt different from the previous forms of power. This felt like purpose. He might have remained content, but one morning he felt a strange sensation. A tiny vibration, rhythmic and persistent. Tap, tap, tap. At his base, a stonecutter worked. Just a man with simple tools, but with each strike, he shaped the mountain. Slowly, patiently, inevitably. The mountain realized with a shock, this simple cutter is changing me. I, who withstand storms and time, am being shaped by his humble tools. He is mightier than the mountain. In that moment, the cosmic joke revealed itself. He had traveled the full circle. From stonecutter to merchant, to prince, to sun, to cloud, to rain, to mountain, and now he saw that the stonecutter was the most powerful of all. Not because of what he had, but because of what he did. Not because of his position, but because of his purpose. The universe granted him one last transformation. He found himself back where he started, hammer in hand, standing before the stone. Same tools, same mountain, same simple life. But everything had changed. No, nothing had changed except his seeing. The stone was just stone, but now he saw its hidden beauty waiting to be revealed. The work was just work, but now he felt its rhythm as a form of meditation. His simple home was just a home, but now he knew it as a palace of contentment. His rough hands were just hands, but now he understood them as instruments of creation. He had sought power in position, in wealth, in cosmic forces. But real power was in alignment, in being who you are, where you are, doing what is yours to do. The merchant's silk hadn't made him happy because he was wearing someone else's life. The prince's throne hadn't satisfied because it wasn't his seat. Even the sun's blaze felt hollow because it wasn't his light to shine. This is your story too, isn't it? Always looking at someone else's life and thinking, if only I had their money, their relationship, their body, their talent. The grass is always greener, we say, but we forget to finish the sentence. The grass is always greener where we're not standing, because we're not there to see its brown patches. Social media has made this worse. Now we can scroll through hundreds of lives that look better than ours. The influencer on the beach, the entrepreneur in the sports car, the perfect family in their perfect home. And with each image, a little voice whispers, if only. We forget we're seeing their highlight reel, not their daily reality. The Buddha taught that contentment is the greatest wealth, not because it stops us from growing or changing, but because it stops us from the exhausting chase for satisfaction in someone else's life. When you're content, you can still improve, still learn, still evolve. But you're doing it from a place of fullness, not emptiness. You're adding to what's already enough, not trying to fill a hole that can't be filled. The stonecutter worked for the rest of his days. Same mountain, same tools, same rhythm of tap, tap, tap. But now, when he shaped stone, he wasn't just making building blocks. He was participating in creation. When his back ached, he didn't think about the merchant's soft cushions. He thought about the strength in his spine, earned through honest labor. When his hands grew rough, he didn't envy the prince's smooth fingers. He saw his calluses as maps of dedication. Sometimes young workers would come to learn from him. They would complain about the hardness of the work, dream aloud about easier lives. He would listen patiently, then hand them a chisel. "The stone doesn't care about your dreams," he'd say gently. "It only cares about the truth of each strike. Be here, with this stone, this tool, this moment. Everything else is imagination." When asked if he ever wished for a different life, he would pause in his work. His hand would rest on the stone he was shaping, feeling its grain, its potential. "I traveled the whole universe looking for satisfaction," he'd say. "I became everything I thought I wanted to be. And you know what I learned? The only power worth having is the power to be yourself, fully and without apology. The only wealth worth accumulating is contentment with what is. The only position worth seeking is alignment with your own nature." He would return to his work then, the rhythm resuming. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of someone who had stopped looking elsewhere for what was always here. The sound of someone who had come home. You can feel it, can't you? That exhaustion of always wanting to be somewhere else, someone else. It's like running on a treadmill, lots of effort, no arrival. But what if you could step off? What if, just for tonight, you could say, "This is enough. I am enough. My life, imperfect as it is enough." This doesn't mean giving up on dreams. It doesn't mean settling for less than you deserve. It means recognizing that the foundation for any meaningful change is acceptance of what is. You can't build a happy future on a foundation of rejecting the present. You can't create a better tomorrow by despising today. The stonecutter's journey wasn't wasted. He needed to become everything else to appreciate being himself. Sometimes we need to travel far to discover that home was good all along. Sometimes we need to try on other lives to realize ours fits best. The journey away is part of the journey home. Rest now, in your own skin. Feel the unique weight of your own life. Yes, it has challenges others don't face, but it also has blessings others can't access. Your particular combination of struggles and joys, gifts and limitations, this is your stone to shape. No one else can do it for you. No one else's life will fit you properly. You are the stone cutter and the stone, the shaper and the shaped, the journey and the destination. Complete in your becoming, whole in your being. The circle always brings us home, to the only place we can truly live, here, now, as ourselves. And now, from this place of contentment, we move to a teaching about patience and the sacred art of tending what's right in front of us. Story 14. The Zen Garden. Almost there now. Almost home. Just 2 more gentle teachings before you rest completely. This one is about the sacred repetition that builds a life, the patience that creates beauty, the practice that becomes prayer. In Kyoto, there is a garden that has been tended for centuries. Not a garden of flowers that bloom and fade, but a dry garden of stones and sand. 15 rocks arranged with such precision that from any viewing angle, 1 rock remains hidden. White sand raked in patterns that suggest ocean waves, though no water flows here. This is a Karasansui garden, where nature is distilled to its essence. For the past 50 years, this garden has been under the care of Master Toru. He inherited this responsibility from his teacher, who inherited it from his teacher, in a line stretching back through time. Every morning, before the tourists arrive, before the city wakes, Toru enters the garden with his wooden rake. I want you to picture him now. An old man, but moving with the grace of someone who has found his rhythm. His rake is worn smooth from decades of use. His hands know every stone, every contour of the space. He doesn't hurry. There's no deadline for beauty. He begins at the eastern edge, where the first light will touch. The rake moves through the sand with a soft whisper. Each stroke deliberate, each pattern emerging like calligraphy written in stone. Concentric circles around the larger rocks, suggesting ripples in water. Long parallel lines in the open spaces, like windswept plains. curved paths that lead the eye on journeys that have no beginning or end. By the time the sun crests the temple roof, the garden is complete. Perfect. A meditation in sand and stone that seems to breathe with its own life. Visitors will come soon, standing at the viewing platform, taking photos, whispering about the beauty and precision. Some will understand that they're looking at more than a garden. They're looking at devotion made visible. But here's what those visitors don't see. By afternoon, wind will have scattered some of the patterns. A cat might walk across one corner, leaving paw prints in the perfect lines. Rain might fall, erasing whole sections. By tomorrow morning, much of today's work will need to be done again. A young monk once asked Toru, "Master, doesn't it frustrate you? All that careful work, undone by wind and weather? Why not build a roof over the garden, protect the patterns?" Toru paused in his raking, considering the question. Then he smiled. "The garden is not the patterns," he said. "The garden is the raking. If the patterns lasted forever, how would I practice? How would I return each morning to this meditation? The wind is my teacher, reminding me that beauty is not a possession. It's a practice." Do you understand what he's saying? We live in a world obsessed with permanent results. We want to solve problems once and have them stay solved. We want to achieve peace and have it last. We want to create something beautiful and preserve it forever. But life doesn't work that way. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a garden to be tended. Think about your own daily repetitions. Making the bed each morning, only to unmake it each night. Washing dishes that will be dirty again by evening. Caring for children who will need the same care tomorrow. Working on projects that will be replaced by new projects. It can feel futile, can't it? Like you're pouring water into a bucket with no bottom. But Toru knows something we forget. The repetition is not futile, it's sacred. Each time you make the bed, you're creating order from chaos. Each dish washed is an act of care for yourself and others. Each repeated task is a chance to practice presence, to bring beauty into the ordinary. The point isn't to finish. The point is to tend. Master Toru has been raking the same garden for 50 years. You might think he'd be bored, that the patterns would become mechanical. But watch him work. Each stroke is fresh. He's not repeating yesterday's pattern. He's creating today's. The sand might look the same, but this morning's light is different. His hands are one day older. The season has shifted imperceptibly. It's the same garden, but it's never the same garden. People think Zen is about achieving some special state, Toru once told a visitor. They imagine monks floating in bliss, free from ordinary concerns. But Zen is this. He gestured to his rake, the sand, his weathered hands. Just this, completely. When I rake, I'm not thinking about enlightenment. I'm thinking about this stroke. And then this one. And then this one. That's all. There's a profound teaching here about patience. Not the patience of waiting for something to happen, but the patience of doing the same thing again and again with full presence. It's the patience of water, wearing away stone, the patience of seasons turning, the patience that knows some things can't be rushed, only tended. When you wash a single dish with complete attention, that's the garden. When you listen to your child tell the same story for the 100th time, that's the garden. When you breathe one conscious breath in the middle of a stressful day, that's the garden. The garden is not somewhere else. It's wherever you bring the quality of tending. Years pass in the garden. Toru ages. His movements become slower, but no less graceful. Young monks come to learn from him. They're eager at first, excited by the beauty they'll create. But after a few weeks of the same routine, they grow restless. When do we move on to advanced techniques? They ask. When do we learn the secret patterns? Toru hands them the rake. This is the advanced technique, he says. This is the secret pattern. Show up. Pay attention. Move the rake. Repeat. Everything profound is hidden in what seems ordinary. The sacred is not separate from the everyday. It is the everyday met with reverence. One morning, a visiting businessman stops to watch Toru work. The man is successful, busy, important. His phone buzzes constantly with urgent messages. But something about the old man's movements makes him pause. He watches for 5 minutes, then 10, then 30. His phone continues buzzing, but he doesn't reach for it. Finally, he speaks. How do you do it? The same thing every day? Don't you want to accomplish something bigger? Leave a lasting mark? Toru completes the stroke he's making before answering. Every morning, I leave my mark, he says. And every morning the universe erases it. This used to trouble me. I wanted my patterns to last. I wanted to build something permanent. But then I understood. The universe is teaching me that beauty doesn't need to last to be real. Impact doesn't need to be permanent to matter. This moment of perfect attention, this is accomplishment enough. The businessman is quiet for a long moment. When he finally speaks, his voice is different. Softer. I build companies, he says. I create things that last. But I'm never satisfied. As soon as one deal closes, I'm chasing the next. I can't remember the last time I felt complete. Come tomorrow morning, Toru invites. I'll teach you to rake. And he does. The businessman returns the next morning, and the next. At first, his strokes are impatient, trying to cover too much ground too quickly. But slowly, he learns the rhythm. He discovers that the rake has its own wisdom, that the sand teaches you how it wants to be moved, that hurrying produces inferior patterns. After a week, he stops coming. But months later, he sends Toru a letter. I still build companies, he writes. But now I understand they're just patterns in sand. Beautiful while they last, but not permanent. And that's okay. I've started arriving at work earlier, not to get ahead, but to water the office plants. It's become my garden, my daily practice of tending without owning. Thank you for teaching me that accomplishment can be as simple as showing up with a rake. This is the deep teaching of the Zen garden. Life is not a project to be completed. It's a garden to be tended. Each day brings its own requirements. Each season its own work. We rake the same sand, wash the same dishes, have the same conversations. And in this repetition, if we're paying attention, we find not monotony but rhythm, not futility but practice, not boredom but deepening presence. Tomorrow, when you face your daily tasks, remember Master Toru. Remember that the garden is not in the patterns but in the raking. That each ordinary action can be a meditation if you bring your full attention to it. That tending what's in front of you with care is a complete spiritual practice. You don't need a monastery. You don't need special tools. You just need to show up and tend your corner of the world. As Toru says, people travel across the world to see this garden. They take pictures of the patterns, but the patterns are just the footprints of practice. The real garden is invisible. It's the accumulated presence of everyone who has ever held the rake. It's the devotion made visible. It's the proof that ordinary actions, repeated with love, become sacred. Your life is your garden. Your attention is your rake. Each moment is sand waiting to be shaped, not for permanence, but for the joy of shaping. Not for achievement, but for practice. The patterns you make today will be gone tomorrow. Make them anyway. Make them with your whole heart. This is the way. And now we come to our final story. The simplest and perhaps the deepest. About the truth that's been here all along, waiting for you to notice. Story 15, The Final Flower. Here we are. At the end, that is also a beginning. All the stories we've shared tonight have been leading to this moment. This final teaching that isn't really a teaching at all. It's more like a recognition, a coming home, a remembering of what you've always known. Near the end of his life, after 45 years of teaching, the Buddha was asked to give one final sermon. Word spread quickly. This would be his ultimate teaching, his final gift. Thousands gathered on Vulture Peak, traveling from distant lands. Monks who had followed him for decades sat beside merchants who had just heard of him. Young seekers pressed close to aging disciples, all waiting for the final wisdom. The crowd arranged itself in expanding circles. Those who had been with him longest sat nearest. Behind them, newer students. Behind them, curious visitors. And at the edges, skeptics and scholars, ready to analyze whatever was said. The air hummed with expectation. What would he say? What final secret would he reveal? The Buddha sat in his familiar posture, spine straight but not rigid, hands resting gently in his lap. His face showed the weathering of age and travel, but his eyes remained bright. He looked out at the vast assembly with infinite compassion. These people who still thought wisdom came from outside themselves, who still believed peace was something to be given rather than recognized. Minutes passed. The silence stretched. Some in the crowd grew restless. When would the teaching begin? Others settled into meditation, assuming this was preparation. But the Buddha just sat, breathing, present, complete. Then, without fanfare, he reached beside him and lifted a single lotus flower. White petals tinged with pink, morning dew still clinging to its surface. He held it up, turning it slowly so all could see. And then, nothing. He simply held the flower. The crowd waited. Surely this was the introduction. He would explain the symbolism. The lotus that grows from mud but blooms in purity. The petals representing different aspects of enlightenment. The teaching would come. It had to come. But the Buddha remained silent. He held the flower as if it were the most precious thing in the universe, as if it contained everything he had ever taught, as if seeing it, really seeing it, was the entire path. The crowd grew confused. Some wondered if he had forgotten his words. Others thought this was a test. Mental wheels turned, trying to decode the meaning. What did the flower represent? What was the hidden message? Minds that had been trained in analysis went into overdrive. But one person in that vast assembly understood. Mahakasyapa, a quiet monk who rarely spoke in gatherings. He looked at the flower, then at the Buddha, and a smile bloomed across his face. Not the smile of someone who had figured out a riddle, not the smile of intellectual understanding, but the smile of recognition, like seeing your own face in a clear mirror after years of looking in muddy water. The Buddha saw that smile. His own face lit up in response. In that moment, two people among thousands shared perfect understanding. No words had passed between them, but everything essential had been communicated. "I have the true Dharma I," the Buddha said, his first and only words that day. The marvelous mind of nirvana, the true form of the formless. It cannot be given by words and letters. This special transmission outside the teachings, I now entrust it to Mahakasyapa. And that was all. The sermon was over. The final teaching had been given. Or had it? What did Mahakasyapa see that others missed? He saw that the flower was the teaching. Not a symbol of the teaching, not a pointer to the teaching, but the teaching itself. Complete, perfect, temporary, alive, present. Everything the Buddha had spent 45 years saying with words was there in the flower, saying itself without words. The flower was impermanent. It would wilt and die. The flower was perfect as it was. It didn't need to become a better flower. The flower was present. It wasn't remembering being a seed or anticipating becoming compost. The flower was unique. No other flower exactly like it had ever existed. The flower was universal. It was made of the same elements as the stars. But even more than that, Mahakasyapa saw that he was the flower, not metaphorically, not poetically, but actually The same life force that opened the lotus petals opened his eyes each morning. The same presence that expressed itself as flower expressed itself as him. There was no separation. There never had been. This is why he smiled. Not because he understood something new, but because he recognized something ancient. The cosmic joke of searching everywhere for what you already are. Of traveling the world, looking for your home, while never leaving it. Of seeking peace while being peace. Of chasing enlightenment while being light itself. All the teachings, all the sutras, all the meditation techniques, they were fingers pointing at the moon. But Mahakasyapa finally looked at the moon and realized he was the moon, and the finger, and the pointing, and the space between. You are this flower, right now, as you lie there listening. Not tomorrow when you're better. Not when you finally figure it all out. Not when your life is more together. Right now, as you are, complete and perfect in your incompleteness. All these stories tonight, the still pond, the bending bamboo, the empty cup, they were all saying the same thing. You are already what you seek. The peace you're looking for is what's looking. The love you crave is what's craving. The awareness you're trying to develop is what's aware right now. But we can't see it because we're looking too hard. Like trying to see your own eyes. Like a wave searching for water. Like space looking for roominess. What we are is so close we miss it. So simple we complicate it. So present we think it must be elsewhere. The flower in the Buddha's hand has traveled through centuries to bloom in this moment. In you. Every teacher who has ever pointed at truth was pointing at what you are. Every scripture ever written was describing your original face. Every practice ever developed was designed to help you stop practicing and just be. Can you feel it? This quiet recognition, like remembering something you never really forgot, like coming home after a long journey only to realize you never left. This is what Mahakasyapa felt. This is why he smiled. Not the smile of achievement, but the smile of remembering. You don't need to hold these teachings. They're not information to be stored. They're mirrors showing you what you already are. You don't need to practice being yourself. You don't need to work at being present. You don't need to strive for peace. You are presence. You are peace. You always have been. The Buddha held up a flower, and in that simple gesture said everything. This moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this is it. This is the entire teaching. Not because it's special, but because it's real. Not because it's profound, but because it's simple. Not because it's different, but because it's exactly what is. Rest now in this recognition. You've journeyed far tonight through stories and teachings, but you haven't moved at all. You're exactly where you started, but seeing it fresh. Like cleaning ancient glass and discovering it was a window all along. You are the still pond. Thoughts may ripple your surface, but your depths remain calm. You are the bamboo. Life may bend you, but you cannot be broken. You are the empty cup, spacious enough to receive each moment fully. You are the sound of one hand, the silence that holds all noise. You are the farmer, finding that every change circles back to who you've always been. You are the second arrow that doesn't need to be shot. You are the tea ceremony happening now in each breath. You are the moon reflected in water, whole regardless of the surface. You are the silent bell ringing in the space between heartbeats. You are the empty boat, free from the burden of blame. You are the master's silence that teaches without words. You are the mustard seed that cannot be found in a house untouched by loss. You are the stonecutter who discovered that all power leads back to simplicity. You are the garden being raked by each moment's passing. You are the flower. Always were, always will be, even when you forget, even when life is hard, even when you feel lost. The flower of your true nature continues blooming, patient, present, perfect. So rest now, not because you need to achieve rest, but because you are rest. Let sleep come if it wants to, or just float in this peaceful darkness. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to become anything. You don't need to understand anything. Just be. Be the flower. Be the one who sees the flower. Be the seeing itself. Be the space in which it all happens. You are all of it. You always have been. Welcome home. Welcome to what you never left. Welcome to yourself. The journey that began with anxiety has ended in recognition. The seeking that started with restlessness has dissolved into being. The questions that drove you here have been answered, not with words, but with presence. You came looking for peace and discovered you are peace. You came seeking rest and found you are rest itself. Sleep now if sleep is calling, or simply rest in this sacred quiet. Tomorrow you'll wake and life will continue. There will be challenges and joys, losses and gains. But something will be different. You'll remember, even if faintly, that you are the flower. That peace isn't somewhere else. That you don't need to become something other than what you are. And in that remembering, everything changes. Not because life becomes easy, but because you stop fighting with life. Not because problems disappear, but because you stop adding problems to problems. Not because you become special, but because you realize you always were. The Buddha's flower is in your hand now. You are the Buddha's flower. Pass it on through your presence. Teach it through your being. Share it through your peace. Not with words, but with the quality of your attention. Not with effort, but with ease. Not tomorrow, but now. Always now. Go now into your rest, carrying nothing, needing nothing, being everything. The Buddha bows to the Buddha in you. The light honors the light. The peace recognizes itself. Sleep well, dear friend. You are loved. You are held. You are enough. Just as you are. Right where you are. forever and always. This is the way. This is the truth. This is the blessing